Larissa Pacheco defeated Kayla Harrison this past Friday at PFL 10 2022 Championships. That's what it's called. Going into the fight, Harrison was previously undefeated at 15-0 and had 2 wins over Pacheco. What is your reaction to this huge upset? Is it the biggest upset in PFL history? How about in WMMA history? Mike, lead off.
Those first 2 questions, I feel like, are probably pretty reasonable to debate. I was certainly surprised. I mean, I thought Kayla Harrison was going to win this fight. We've seen her win it twice before. She did great in the tournament. She seems like she's on this upward trajectory to being, one of the big female stars in the sport. So this seemed like, her chance to do the three-peat, all the stuff that went with it. But yeah, it wasn't her night, I guess. I mean, this was a tough one in there for her. She just really couldn't get her game rolling. I'm interested to, not to make excuses for her or anything, just know all the stuff that really went on with her in the lead up to this fight. She had alluded to, and in truth, Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour on the week of the fight, that she had been through a lot physically, like some medical issues throughout this year that have kind of plagued her. And I just wonder if that all kind of came to roost in this fight. But that's obviously taking something away from Larissa Pacheco too, who showed great improvement in this fight and really was able to, stuff the takedowns, get in the groove out there. And I think she deserved this win. I think it was 3-2. That was pretty much how the judges scored it. So it made sense and great for her. I think it probably is the biggest upset in PFL history, one of the bigger upsets in women's MMA history, but not the number one, right? I mean, I think we all need to maybe not be prisoners of the moment when it comes to this and think back to like Ronda Rousey versus Holly Holm. I don't think people who weren't like living in the moment when Ronda Rousey was on her run in the UFC, what she was doing to other women in there, how fast she was beating them, how dominantly they were putting her on the cover of, Ring magazine, talking about her boxing Floyd Mayweather and how she would do against the UFC men's bantamweights. I mean, you guys remember all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
It was absolutely insane at the moment, the fever pitch. So for Holly Holm to go beat her the way she did, a finish, all that stuff, to me, it still is the biggest upset. And even Juliana Pena, tip of the hat for what she did against Amanda Nunes in their first fight. So to me, like, this didn't have that shocking moment. There wasn't that crazy finish or something like definitive like those other 2 fights. It was just a hard effort, nice game plan execution by Larissa Pacheco, and she won a decision, which for Kayla Harrison could maybe be even more deflating in a way. The fact that she can't really come out and be like, hey, I just got caught. Like, she lost fair and square to someone who executed better than her on the night. So definitely a big upset, one we'll be talking about, a big fall from grace and kind of reality check moment, whatever you want to call it, for Kayla Harrison. And definitely going to be interesting to see how this sets up the future for PFL, as I'm sure we'll get into as well.
Yeah, and by the way, bravo to both ladies, man. That was one heck of a main event. They both dug deep. The 5th round is basically what it all came down to. The judges were unanimous there. How about you, Goes? What are your thoughts here? Let me repeat the 2 questions, and then you can take it whatever direction you want. Your reaction to this upset, obviously, is it the biggest upset in PFL history, or how about in WMMA history? I guess that's 3 questions.
Well, I think if you look at our staff picks on MMA Junkie, there were a few Pachecos on there. I don't remember seeing that for like the Amanda Nunes Juliana Pena fight or Holly Holm and Ronda Rousey. I think it was pretty much all across the board. We had one person. So I'd probably say it's not the biggest upset in women's history, or definitely not. But in PFL history, yeah, probably. This one stings a lot, man. But I'm trying to figure out if it's a good thing for PFL or a bad thing. Because I'll tell you this, I'm probably more excited to see these 2 girls fight again than I would be, say, Aspen Ladd stepping in there and facing Larissa Pacheco. So maybe it is a good thing for PFL. I don't know. But it's not a good thing for Kayla Harrison, because before this fight, her name was associated with some very big names. Chris Cyborg, Amanda Nunes. I think after that performance, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think those girls are all in the same class. It just didn't look that way. Now, if Larissa Pacheco was another name that was being thrown in there with those girls of that caliber, then it wouldn't hurt as bad. But she's not. And I think Kayla still has a couple holes here that she has to be able to fix up, to shore up in her game. So really, when you look at the landscape of the whole thing overall for Kayla, this is going to set her back a lot. Even if she comes back and beats Larissa Pacheco, unless she does it in absolute devastating fashion, the way GSP did against Matt Serra, that made us almost forget what happened. I don't think it's impossible for Kayla to get back to this type of status, but it's definitely a long road.
All right. Now, Billy247 in the chat says, PFL history, maybe. Sarah over GSP, still the biggest to me. It's tough to beat anyone 3 times in a row if you don't change the game plan. Yeah, that's kind of weird. When I looked at WMMA, I don't remember seeing Matt Serra and GSP's names there. But thank you, Billy, for halfway participating. How about you, Nolan? Participate.
Yeah, I mean, for all the reasons Mike said this, I don't think I could call it the biggest upset in women's MMA history. I'd have to go and look at PFL. I mean, obviously, she's somebody that has been their star more than anybody else that they've had. So they've put all the chips in on her. They've pushed her as much as they can. She's on all the commercials, you know. So for me, obviously, it's a pretty big upset. I'm not trying to downplay it like that, but I think if you look at it from a magnitude standpoint, yeah, it's a huge upset. But if you look at it from a skill standpoint, I think people were maybe a little bit misled coming into this fight, a little complacent because of how those first two fights went. But they didn't realize that Larissa Pacheco has looked like a different beast this season, that she's definitely improved. So for me, I think it was a very, very solid upset. It had a lot of magnitude. It was a big deal, no doubt about it. But I think when we got to pump the brakes when we start throwing, Holm over Rousey or Pena over Nunes into the conversation. As far as this goes, where Kayla Harrison goes from here and kind of what's her deal and her stock, like, I think there's the mystique of having that zero. It's no longer there. I think that we can't underplay that kind of mental marketing that goes on when you have the fighter you've never seen them lose. And I think you see sometimes girls before they get in the public eye, they lose. They have a loss on their record in their third pro fight. Nobody watches it. And then they go on a huge run. And by the time people go back and look at that highlight, it looks like a different person. That's not Jose Aldo. That's not Conor McGregor. So you don't really mentally, you don't see that person lose in the big stage. Now we've seen Kayla Harrison lose in the big stage. So I think it will be good for her progress long-term in terms of her abilities. I think she can fix some mental things that went on in that fight. She can definitely fix some physical things that went on in that fight, heal up, like Mike said. But overall, I think that it's going to be maybe she's going to have to get the ball start rolling again before we start, people start hankering for a Cyborg fight or a Nunes fight, or start putting her in that conversation as the best in the world again.
Yeah, Nolan, you brought up some good points there about the losses and where they happened. If I'm not mistaken, Cyborg and Anand Barral both lost their first fights and then peeled off like 25 or some ridiculous amount of wins in a row. So yeah, I mean, it's happened to basically almost everybody in the sport. I think Kayla will come back strong, and I agree with Goes. I think it's going to be a big fight for PFL when they run it back the fourth time. No disrespect to Ladd. She had a tough win over Julia Budd. Maybe she feels like she might be next. She actually had some interesting comments, which I disagree with, talking about resumes, but regardless,